sufficient to ensure students in Wisconsin continue to thrive, let alone trying to fund two separate systems in our state. Yet even with these grave shortfalls in funding, even with the voucher program taking out $573 million out of our public school systems, the state of Wisconsin public schools are still ranking in the top 10 in the nation. Imagine what we could do if our schools were funded properly. So I end where I began, applauding the school board, administration, faculty, and staff of Kickapoo area schools and all the public schools that have continued to educate and care for the children of Wisconsin, despite being under constant financial stress. Thank you for all you do for our students and communities. Thank you.
Thank you both, Rich and Steve. Good comments. And I think that's the end of tonight's list of speakers. Moving on then to item 5, we're going to continue the discussion on the voucher program, the topic of both of our audience presentations. And when the resolution went out, it's only been, what, a couple months since we approved it, and it went out in numerous, through numerous media sources, and has, I think this was our goal, educated the public and raised, elevated the level of attention on that topic. We were contacted by Senator Brad Pfaff and Representative Lauren Oldenburg, who asked to attend tonight's meeting, and they are invited to come on up and provide comments. And since this is not under audience of visitors and board members, there's no time limit, and we're free to ask questions, board members, as we'd like.
Well, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Scott, and welcome. My name is Brad Pfaff. I serve as a state senator in the 32nd Senate District. I'm a proud graduate of Melrose Maduro High School, the far northern part of the state Senate District, class of 1986. I have 13 years of public education, K through 12, undergraduate as well as graduate school. Believe me, I understand the importance of public education. Before we talk about public education, I want to thank all of you for serving on the school board. As elected officials, you take the tough votes, and I greatly appreciate that. But we do something unique in this state. We keep positions like school board nonpartisan, and these elections are held in April, not in the fall. And I think it's important that we recognize the fact that we need to make sure that we continue to work with our elected school boards in a nonpartisan way in order to make sure that we do what's best for the communities that we all represent. So within the 32nd State Senate District, which runs from the Black River in northern La Crosse County here into Vernon County, as well as into southern Trumbull County and western Monroe County, I have 790 students that participate within the private school choice. Within that, I also have 21 school districts. Of those 21 school districts, 19 have students that are participating. Only 2 do not. Blair Taylor, which is the very far northern part of the district, and then North Crawford, which is in the far southern part of the district, do not have any students that in the 23-24 school year that participated within this private school voucher program. But our state's constitution, Article 10 of our state's constitution, very specific. And I want to read to you what it says. Because I think, as public policy makers, it's important that we take a step back and we know what the Constitution of our state says. It says the following: the legislature shall provide by law for the establishment of district schools which shall be as nearly uniform as practical. And such schools shall be free and without charge for tuition to all students between the ages of 4 and 20 years. And no sectarian instruction shall be allowed therein. I read to you from the Wisconsin Constitution, because I believe that this state cannot afford to have two education systems. The system that we have right now was first established in 1990. Former Governor Thompson moved that idea forward. It was approved in the legislature on a bipartisan basis. It was for 1,000 students at a cost of a little less than $1 million. Today, including Kenosha and Milwaukee, what they have, then you add the statewide charter, it's far exceeded that. $573 million. So the question becomes, where do we go here? What are the next steps? If we all recognize what public schools mean for our community, particularly for our rural communities, the pride that those of us that attended public schools, what we have in our pride we have in our district, Friday night football games, the conference tournaments, being able to come to school activities, the pride we have with our graduating classes, the local FFA, all of that is very important. This community, as well as the community in which I am from. But we have a situation in the legislature in which this is where we're at. That doesn't mean we have to continue, but we have a situation in which we are currently spending $573 million on this program. And I, like the previous speaker, I want to make sure that parents, I am a parent, parents can be part of their children's education, have confidence that the curriculum, what's being taught, that they can feel comfortable with that. But I also know that we need to make sure that we keep public education system strong. We have to continue to invest in it. As you are aware, the most recent state budget that was signed into law, we did see an increase in public education funding, but also an increase funding for budget. So this is an important public policy debate. I'm glad that you're the comments that you shared with me. I look forward to continuing to work with you. But the question is that where do we go from here? I've shared with you the history that we've had dating back to the state's constitution, which our state founders wrote in the Constitution about the importance of public education as well as the normal school, University of Wisconsin system, and the Common School Fund. All of that was written into our Constitution. I shared with you in 1990, when Governor Thompson and the legislature at that time first started this. And now we say, 34 years later, the numbers have been shared with you. And again, I think all of us collectively want to work together in order to make sure that students in this school district, as well as students throughout the state, get an opportunity to succeed. So I appreciate the opportunity to be here, Scott. Appreciate the work that you as board members do. And again, I look forward to taking the comments, or questions that you may have.
Yeah, thank you for having us. Thank you for reaching out and inviting us. I'm Lauren Oldenburg. I represent the 96th district. Been down there for the last 6 years. Graduated from Broco High School 40 years ago. It doesn't seem that long ago, but it was 40 years ago. Also farm outside of Jasper on my 4th-generation farm. Went on to school for UWL for 3 years. Decided that wasn't for me. I came home and farmed. So, this topic, number one, thank you for running. I always say the hardest political job out there is local town boards, local county boards, local school boards, city councils, because you are the closest to people. You are at, your decisions you make really affect your neighbors, your friends, and your family. It's not an easy job, and thank you for what you do. As far as school funding, in the state budget here, we did put $1 billion in public funding. Granted, what really messed this whole situation up of funding is this ESSER funds from the federal dollars through the COVID process. Really messed up the funding process, how it goes forward. So, address the $573 million, the private vouchers. The state assembly, we actually passed the bill to cover that money for GPR. The Senate never took it up. Not blaming Brad, because he never had an opportunity to bring it up because of the leadership in the Senate. They never brought it forward. So we understand down in the state assembly that we have to address this situation. $573 million is a lot of dollars. So we're going to make you guys whole with covering it for the GPR dollars. That did not make it through. We were kind of promised it would. As far as on the assembly side, it never did that. One thing when the governor signed the budget, he did a line item veto. And going forward for the next 400 years, but we won't go that far out. You'll get a student per aide of $325 going forward every year. Roughly right now you get $11,700 per student. So in 10 years that'll be up into $15,000. Hopefully that kind of stuff helps you to catch up. Roughly 1.2 million more dollars coming your way over the next 10 years time, as far as what the budget is set as what now. So roughly $113,000 you had to pay back. Just give me some rough numbers, right? That was part of that. Would have been that 500 within that $573 million. Your chunk was that $113,000, right? So one question I have for you guys, I think we're struggling all in the rural districts is student numbers. It is not going this way. It's probably going this way or flat. And with inflation the last 24 to 36 months going this way, everything operates very expensively, and we're behind. And we didn't know it was going to go this, and to catch up will take some time, and hopefully we get there.
Be happy to take any questions or thoughts.
I think just some order. Well, so if I could ask you a question, sir. So, some other person, Oldenburg, mentioned the GPR.
Yeah.
So I understand it didn't go to the Senate, but I don't want to put you on the spot, but what your thoughts have been on that, because in my view, unless we had a new tax funding source, there's a pie. So we're taking this out for schools. Now part of this small wedge is going to private schools. So taking out the GPR, I don't know how that fixes it if you didn't have if you don't have additional taxes. So you're going to have to get the money from somewhere. So you're going to have to cut some other programs or something else. And at least from what I've read about the GPR, then there'll be less oversight on how that money is tracked or spent.
Thank you for the question. For those of you unaware, GPR is general purpose revenue. I would have voted I would have voted against it for the simple reason that, again, that $525 million general purpose revenue could be used for things like paving roads, bridges, or conservation efforts. It could be used for a variety of different things. So it can be used for taxes. So I would have voted against that. But again, you know, the question that we have as a state, and that's why this conversation that we're having here at the board meeting is very important. Where does the state go forward now? Because as has been mentioned, in 1990, when Governor Thompson and the legislature first did that, 1,000, and it was a statewide cap. Now there's no cap in the state. The cap has been lifted, and we have the dollar amount that was supposed to be at the time $1 million, and now we're talking $575 million. So, as been mentioned, we have demographic challenges. And again, I want to be clear. Of the 21 districts public school districts that I represent, the 32nd Senate district, there's only a handful, less than a handful, that actually have growing enrollment. West Salem and Bangor, but big districts like La Crosse, have really seen a declining enrollment. And even the other big districts, Pullman and Onalaska, their first and second grade classes enrollment are not as big as the graduating enrollment. So we're starting to see all of this. And so, I personally do not believe the state can afford to have two education systems. I believe in reform. And there's ideas that we can have as far as charter schools within our public schools. And there's many districts here in this area that do that. So, I believe that there's opportunities for us, because we need to continue to make sure that we provide the little ones that walk in the door, children in the door, students in the door, that they get an opportunity for the best education. But I would have voted.
I guess a follow-up or related question that addresses the attempts now by the legislature to fill the hole that's been created for public schools by the voucher program. It seems to be putting the cart before the horse, in the sense that in the years I worked for the state, if you had an idea for a program or a building project, part of the evolution of that program or building project or whatever, before it's even approved, is ensuring you've got money to fund it.
Correct.
Nothing would ever get approved unless the approvers, including the legislature, would see that there were dollars allocated for it. So I guess it's worrisome, given the hard discussions we've had about budgets and having to reach out to our taxpayers through the referendum for additional funding. They have seen this voucher program explode to the tune of $500 million plus coming out of public school coffers. And then to hear now there's discussions about where the funding is going to come from. And I agree, GPR is not. That may create more problems than it solves elsewhere in state government. But doesn't that approach seem like a little cart before the horse? We've allowed this program that never had legislative review, was created as part of the governor's budget, flourish, start to draw funds from public schools. And now we're worried about finding funding to repair.
Well, it was probably the biggest, kind of the opportune time is because we had excess dollars as far as into the state budget. That's where the dollars were available for that. I think, within that legislation, and I can't remember what was in there, maybe it has to be, like how it started out in 1990 with the 1,000 student cap. We have to start maybe looking at the cap numbers for those dollars, but also, in that kind of piece of legislation that make, you guys whole, has to be, knowing that you cannot be pulled out underneath you 2 years down the road.
mentioning caps, I guess for either, of you, have there been any discussions in either the assembly or the Senate with the problem that seems obvious? Because I think now it's capped at 8% of students can go to voucher schools. I believe in 26, 27, as you mentioned, the cap goes away. So there's another year and then who knows what can happen. Has there been any discussion of, okay, let's not get rid of a cap or keep some rails in place until funding is identified or that you said funding discussion is had, like Scott mentioned, because I know working at the federal level, I mean, it's a law that if you have a program, it has to be funded and approved before you even start.
I'm not aware. I'm not aware.
Well, just any, and I don't know if either of you are on the education committee, but
No.
just if you heard of any discussion, at least thinking about that instead of just letting it happen.
That's, we could pass that going forward and pass that your concern on and say, hey, this is,
I do think that, I will say this, that I do think that's this conversation is taking, these kind of conversations are taking place. It's an election year. I do think that the makeup of the legislature going forward, there will be conversations on what transpires and how we continue to make sure that we have Wisconsin public education to be competitive statewide and nationwide. So, yes, I'm not aware of these conversations as far as public hearings that are taking place in the legislature, but I do know going forward, depending upon what happens with the legislative elections, as far as what direction that we'll go forward here with all of this. And again, I can't speak for for the assembly. I can't speak for my colleague, Representative Oldenburg. I can't speak for any of my other colleagues. All I can tell you is that the position I hold is that I do not believe the state of Wisconsin can afford to have two education. As a parent, I want to make sure parents have opportunities to allow their children to succeed. And of course, I have friends and I communicate regularly with, private school districts that I represent. Maybe Aquinas Catholic Schools in La Crosse or Onalaska Lutheran School District or, within rural. But I also, I've been pretty clear in my position. It's that I don't believe the state of Wisconsin can afford two systems. And I go back to the Constitution. Within the Constitution of 1848, that's where.
Thank you both.
I have a question, maybe I'm not understanding, but so you were saying that our school was like 11,000 that we give is for each student, like we get 11,000, and then you said within, in 10 years we'll be getting 15,000, but with the inflation rate in 10 years, everything is going to cost a lot more than $4,000 more than what it costs now. So, I mean, in my mind, that doesn't seem like an increase to me. It should increase that much anyway, but like it
well, at
doesn't
least we're
seem like
heading in
it's
the right direction because,
because they hadn't
correct.
Risen it or
Yeah.
raised it before.
Right.
That's maybe where I was confused because it's been the same for so long.
Right.
Okay.
I guess I'd agree, it's headed in the right direction, but the per pupil state funding, which is a totally separate issue, it's maybe something you come back and talk about, because as part of the referendum development process, Kim brought together some really nice data showing that our gap, and probably that for every public school, between our state revenues and our expenses is continuing to widen.
It's probably widened quickly the last 2 years. Probably
Yeah.
faster than,
Yeah. But it goes back 25 years.
I don't necessarily have a question. It's more of a statement that, I know we've talked about a lot as a board is the uncertainty of funding. One of the hardest things I think we do is when we build a budget, we're looking at the next year and trying to predict, right, what the situation's gonna be.
Right.
Is there anything, I mean, what can be done to try to get more predictability for people like us to know what dollars are truly coming, and be able to build real budgets instead of hypothetical budgets that, we don't figure out until halfway through the school year?
You guys probably can understand the school funding better, rather than I can. It's very difficult, there's a lot of money that comes into transportation, general aid, sub aid, property tax, stuff like that. But one thing, going forward, with what happened in the budget per line, hopefully gives you some kind of sense as what direction, that you can kind of plan going forward.
For 2 years,
Yeah.
which I think he was meaning a little longer term than that.
Yeah, that's right. We have a 2-year biennium. It's a 2-year biennium. Now, I will do my best on this. It's stuff the time. One of the other things that Governor Thompson passed in the early 1990s and received bipartisan support was 2/3 funding for our public schools. We're not there. I think we get there. I'd like to get there. And I'd like to have that conversation. So we got to continue to talk about this. And so, we talk about per pupil aid, and there was a veto that was done that stretched this out for hundreds of years. But that is $325 per pupil increase, annually. But the thing is that getting to the 2/3 public funding, that's something that as a board, you may want to get more information on that and talk going forward. That was something that Governor Thompson and the, again, bipartisan legislature back in '93 passed. And I don't have my numbers in front of me, Scott, but I don't believe it. I don't believe it.
I think we're about,
No, we are not.
no, I think we're.
And that we have not had a revenue limit adjustment. We go back to 15, 16 and there's $0 of increase. In 1920, there was 175. In 23, 24 and moving forward, like you said, we did get the 325. But that does not meet the CPI increase at all, which puts all of that burden back on our taxpayers.
Did you do the revenue cap one or no? From 10,000 to 11,000, the revenue cap?
The
Yeah,
revenue,
yeah.
we would have, yeah.
It's a good question.
And I don't expect there's an answer, but just
Well, it is something I would,
something to talk about.
and I think talking about 2/3, I mean, that is something, again, Thompson in the legislature 30 years ago had this conversation. They passed it. We're not beating that out of it. And it's something we can talk about. Budgets are about, you guys know this. You guys are in school. Budgets are about priorities. And in my opinion, education is a priority. Public education is a priority. Coming from a rural area, I hear you. I hear you. And I do my best to understand. Representing 21 public schools that vary in size from La Crosse and Holman, to districts like Lafarge, it's a different enrollment cap. But having said that, all those parents want to make sure their children get up. That's what there.
Give you a little insight of our caucuses when we talk about education and so. We have very rich school districts. And so then it's like, okay, we give per students. Well, we're giving to them too, which they don't need the excess revenue. So we want to give it to you guys. That's our fight within the caucus. How do we prop up, the less, I would say the less land value school districts where your property taxes aren't high. Then you have the bigger one down in the southeast part of the state where very wealthy ones building multi-million dollars of schools. That's where the fight becomes. We want to support where the money needs to go to the best. But how do you, with the formulas, it's so hard to separate without doing it kind of across the board the same. That's the struggle that we have, you know, within our caucus to figure out how do we, you know, support the ones that really need the support. And the ones that kind of can fund themselves, you know, how do we do that? It's very hard with the formulas that we have right now.
Yeah, the form, Lauren's not wrong there. It's saying, you know, I'm one of the very few rural Democrats in the state. In fact, I'm the only one. How we just redistricting from Jeff Smith up in Eau Claire is more urban. So you know, I think I bring a very unique voice to my caucus, especially those that represent the larger urban areas. And you know, I will continue to bring that voice. I just need to. I do believe that we need to take a look at the funding formula in this state. And I do think as we have this conversation, I know it doesn't help you plan long term, but you know, these legislative elections that are taking place this fall will help make this. Once those elections are over, there will be, you know, what the new makeup of the legislature looks like. There will be that debate that will take place in the upcoming budget on this. It definitely will. Yeah, again, that's why I began my conversation by saying, where do we go as we move forward? Because we know what we have right now. We know what started in the Constitution. We know what the Thompson and the bipartisan legislature did in 1990. Now we're sitting at $573 million. Where do we go? And I stand ready to go to work. I've been given the opportunity to be elected. I stand ready to go to work and have this conversation. I know it's not going to be easy, and you know I recognize that, but I also recognize that there needs to be a conversation that has to be had. Because as Lauren said earlier, we also have districts that have real declining enrollment, and then we got to have those conversations as well. So,
Like lacrosse school district.
like lacrosse school,
They're losing 100 students a year. That's $1 billion a year. They've done that for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
It's $10 million that they've lost, you know, just because of students.
that's exactly right. And we got aging buildings, and I know you're working with buildings. We got aging buildings, they got declining enrollment, and of course, if you look at the tax base.
And how many vouchers do they have that they're paying for? So
I-
to kind of bring this back, I get,
Across a lot.
Yeah.
1.2 million.
I get your point, Lauren, about having to balance things, and I know that always comes up, and what can we get? Because we gotta keep everybody happy, you know, and unfortunately, with a certain amount of money, there's no way everybody can get an equal share of the pie, but what I'm missing here is, I know what vouchers are doing to our rural schools. I have no background on the urban areas. How is it helping them? I can't understand why vouchers, how people are supposed to support public can really, where's the value in vouchers to even the bigger schools? Can you, I don't know what it is, but yet it's entrenched in somebody because that's what the legislature continues to fund. That would seem to me to at least keep caps. I mean, it's hard to, when something gets in, it's hard to get
Well,
it
yeah,
out,
you can't
but
also,
you can stop the growth possibly.
that's where we have to look at, because like you say, you just can't stop it tomorrow. You know, you have to go back to
Well,
something what might be.
You could, but
Yeah,
you guys are the ones that would have the power to do that, but I get it, you
Yeah.
can't, but
right.
at least, you know, keep the caps on or something. I mean, you know, we're bleeding, at least leave the bandage on for a while. It's,
Well, Illinois just did kill the vouchers. There was a strong grassroots effort expressing a lot of the same concerns that were expressed tonight. Illinois Accident Better Voucher Program within the last year. So it can be done, but that's the first time I wanted to apply. Illinois. Maybe related to Janet's question, you know, this plays out at a lot of levels. And, you know, Kickapoo School District is just a microcosm. $573 million being funneled to private schools, where we account for $160,000 at least last year. But the lens we're looking through, given all our discussions and the heart-wrenching referendum process we just went through, the lens we're looking through, like Janet said, makes it hard to understand why anybody values that cares about public schools the voucher. So I guess the question is, given that you both operate in the Capitol and you're talking to us tonight, there will be another group next week that supports the voucher program. And we know that this is not just a Wisconsin issue, it's a national issue. Many states are dealing with it. What are for you folks representing the districts you do, what are your touch points? I mean, what information is meaningful to you as you go into the chambers and the committee meetings and talk about the voucher program? Is there anybody else we could be communicating with so they, whether or not they're swayable, they understand our concerns and understand the impact the voucher program is having?
Data. Numbers. That's, I can sell numbers all day. I can't sell out there, you know, but you can come in here and, hey, this is what's happening to our rural schools. Kickapoo is right down, you know, and it's right down to how, what has it done from, say, when it opened up, from the $1,000 cap, when those numbers, where we're at today. This is what's happening to our rural public schools.
Yeah, I will say the following, that is that, don't ever conceive the child is not important, because it is. In the quality of education that a student receives, this district, hang your head high, feel good, doing the level best. Do that. Thing is, in order to make sure you keep functioning public school and Kickapoo moving forward, we have to continue to invest in public education. Now, obviously, there's the economic drive of what is having a public school in this community, what it means to this area. It's significant. And of course, the pride of that for school as well. That is absolutely tremendous. But you know, and continue to obviously push and challenge your educators, your faculty, and I know you do, because we need it. I mean, we need to make sure that the students that graduate from this school and all our schools you know, are prepared to meet the challenges that today's world has and what tomorrow will bring. So, you know, do not concede any ground on that. We continue to push, but also recognize that the greater good that comes from happiness here as well. And, so, you know, I have next door neighbors that you know, send their children to, you know, parochial schools. I have next door neighbors that are sending their children to another public school, not in the district that they're based in, but they're doing open enrollment going to another. You know, it's all, again, I will let the parents make that decision, but I also think that it's, you know, having a strong public education is important to this community and to the state of Wisconsin.
also besides this topic, it's something that I think, you know, we have to address even at state level or local or university level is, how do we get more students going to education program? I think that is something that I know you struggle, you know, and that's every superintendent. I talk to Tom up there in Roqua quite often. And I don't know an exact answer to that, but we really have to, do something to make at least you have more than one option to hire someone when a school is a teaching position.
I think completely agree, or the more that we can encourage people to consider, going into education as a professional field, and better off. For sure.
But I think it's tied together, right? I mean, I think most teachers do it because they want to educate children and it's a profession, but we also have to be able to pay them their, benefit. And with the lack of funding, it becomes a struggle. Do you have enough teachers? Do you fix windows? Can you meet CPI and at least keep up with inflation? So another topic, but I think it's very much tied to.
It is. You're absolutely right.
I don't know, maybe this is naive, but I think the underlying bedrock here is we're just dealing with, if you want to say, different philosophies on the role of government, how much government should do. So what I see is a priority for the Republicans is to keep taxes low. I mean, it's probably something of priority for both parties. But I think that for the Republicans, it's been a bit more of a priority. But because of that, it's over time, it's kind of created almost a hostility toward government and a favoring of private institutions. And I think that's where we're at. Period.
We actually can, right? Is it
Yeah.
just so?
Yeah, it's supposed to just be the one.
This is just the board. Appreciate the comments, but this is the chance to speak to the board.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We have a slide on the agenda for visitors.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Oh, that's fine.
I just thought I'd throw that out. I didn't understand the.
But just one comment. I know we're going long, that maybe if you guys could also take back when you start your discussions is, we've talked about, we had to go to referendum, increase property taxes. So, the money that goes to Kickapoo is on our property taxes. It'd be nice if money that went to voucher schools would also be on the property taxes, because people seem surprised at how much money is going to voucher schools, that without people trying to put the information out there, people didn't even know what's going on. If they see it on their property tax, they're gonna be like, what the heck is this?
I have a bill on it. I actually have a piece of legislation that would do that. I haven't got it.
Being transparent. Is
Yes.
definitely, a whole government agency should be
Yeah.
very transparent.
Was that bill voted on?
No, but I have a piece of legislation.
Maybe.
I'm a co-sponsor of a piece of legislation that we just what you say. But I will say, to be transparent, I am proud to say DPI, Department of Public Instruction, now can have on their published dashboard the money that will go. But I agree, I would like to see on that property tax bill, where we see that first week in December.
As we did our public listening sessions, went out for our, to push our agenda for our referendum. That was something very few people were aware of. I think this district is much more educated now than they were a year ago, but then I think, was it Mr. Campbell mentioned too, that he wasn't even aware of that, so I'm sure he's aware of what's going on, but the general public, they didn't even know that. Wouldn't that be nice if, like, right on the bill, it was, local property tax and, how much went to your local school and how much went to voucher schools, so. I mean, it just never seemed fair to me that you kind of use public schools. Like you said, in legislatures that's made it. We were running it through us. Yeah, we have to tax for it, but we don't get it. Yeah, so to tell people, and I think until was last year when it took a big jump to the 113,000, which for us is a lot of money, by the way. I know Madison, it doesn't sound like much, but
Public students.
11. Yeah, 11, but the numbers I have is 11, and then Baroque had 81. I see in front here, the Baroque, he's here now. Baroque had 81, and who had 11.
Roughly $500-some thousand for you. isn't it?
we're gonna be at $1 million next year.
Yeah, right now.
It's good, but people want to know, you mentioned DPI, I mean, that's where the 573 million came from, I mean, you can go to DPI and there's a Excel spreadsheet with every voucher school and every amount of money that totals 573 million. So you can see exactly who's,
So at least that data is there and it's.
I mean,
It's deep.
it's hard to find, it's hard to find.
Yeah, it's hard to find.
But it is.
Just like school funding, right?
Any other questions? I guess just one quick, during your comments, Brad, you question the constitutionality of the program itself. Are there any?
I will rephrase as best I can. I didn't question, what I brought up was our state constitution is very specific as far as, and I read what it says because, I think that's important. And what the Constitution specifically says the following is that the legislature shall provide by law for the establishment of district schools that shall be nearly uniform as practical, and such schools shall be free without charge for tuition for all children between ages 4 and 20. Yeah, specifically. So.
And there was something that followed that.
Yeah, and then no sectarian obstruction shall be allowed therein. However, I knew you guys would ask that. The Wisconsin Supreme Court in 1998 held in the decision Jackson versus Benson that, quote, the mere appropriation of public monies for private school does not transform that school into a district under this section. Meaning, the state can send public dollars to private schools and they would pay private schools. That was a 1998 decision. So, I'm not trying to plow any new ground. I'm just sharing with you what's out there. But again, I think I appreciate the opportunity to come before, say hello. I don't have any answers as far as what has happened. I just want to share with you what happened. I come to you and ask that we can work together moving forward. And I do believe there's some opportunities. I did mention to you what's already been done. That is 2/3 funding that was passed by the legislature and signed by Governor Thompson back in 1983. Yeah, that is a conversation that we can have. The school aid formula that is equitable for rural districts. That's a conversation that can take place going forward. And then, what does happen when it comes to the private voucher system. But, I think this is all part of a conversation that we're having today and will take place next year, because there will be a year right now that we will have hopefully a state budget signed into law.
Yeah, June of next year. June 30th.
Well, I guess I just say thanks very much again for your willingness to come here. I think as a school board, our goal was just to shine a light on this issue, because again, through our lens, it is crystal clear the detrimental effects that public schools across the state are feeling. So it's all about communication. Appreciate your willingness to come tonight and communicate, and maybe you picked up some details that in future discussions in Madison will provide some benefit. And if there's
You have our emails, as far as data, something that's you see that's coming that you'll see it before us. That is either through all DPIs doing something or legislation or whatever, let us know, because otherwise, you'll see it before we even do it.
Very good. Good luck, rest of your summer. And, thank you for the work you do and for your leadership.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Spoke very much.
Thank you all. Thanks. Thank you.
All right, good discussions. Moving on, and now we're into our meeting to expense vouchers and receipts. Assume everybody had a chance to glance through this one set. Any questions? Concerns about anything contained therein?
And I was gonna ask, in the receipts, there's a bunch of, make sure I have the right page here. There's a bunch of, at the very end, with like open enrollment tuition and some state aid things, there's a bunch of negative numbers there. What's,
So that was part of our aid payment at the end of the year, and it just kind of incorporates like the tuition that we had to pay out for kids that are open enrollment out, and then it has our
open enrollment
in numbers.
state aid?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Which I get that, yes. Yeah. General state aid deduction, but then general aid deposit is also a negative number, and that's like $1.5 billion. Is there another one somewhere that's? I mean, I've heard, I was hearing on the radio last week, different aid amounts that had changed and stuff, and I thought, well, maybe it's got something to do with that, but the number doesn't make sense.
It has to do with the fact that it went in as on the asset side instead of as a revenue because of the way the whole payment came in and was broke down with the payments that came out of the aid for, like she said, for the open enrollment out. The payments that came in for our open enrollment in kids, payments that went out for the voucher students. So because it came in as a cash instead of a revenue. It came in on the debit side instead of the credit side, which is why
I
it's
just wonder what the money
It's
is.
reflecting backwards.
So why is there a negative $1.5 billion? I get those lower amounts, but where's the big amount coming in then? You're saying it's not there, is it scattered or something? I mean, that's an answer too, I guess.
It is broken up over a couple of different entries.
Okay. Oh, it's only just this one. Actually, I don't know that the whole thing only totals $440,000, so. It's not in this one.
The 1.475 is the aid deposit. The negative, the one that's in the parentheses.
These are receipts. Like, get money from Carlton Perkins, right? That's a minuscule amount of $10 million, but it's a positive number because that was money coming into us. So we got, where's what's something to deal with that we don't understand? High cost transportation. We got almost $130,000. It's a positive number because it's coming into us. So did we not get a big state aid payment at the end of the year or not?
We did.
But where is,
It's the 1.475.
it's a negative number, so that doesn't.
It's the net. Because it's the net of, it's part of a big receipt. And it goes in kind of more like a journal entry than a cash receipt. Because there's revenues in there and there's expenditures in there. And then you just end up with this net asset amount.
Okay, I've just not seen. What's long as I've questioned that there's some.
So the 896,110, that's a revenue. The the 113,811, that was the payment that went out for our voucher students that was deducted out for aid. The 498,471 was deducted out. So that 1,475 ended up being our net. Once we got our payment in for our open enrolled in, they took out our payments for the open enrolled out in the voucher students. It just looks funny because of the way it goes through the accounting system. It's there,
It's there.
it's there.
I'm gonna
What-
trust you. I have to trust it.
Yeah. That struck,
The activity fund thing.
that struck me too, when I saw that big negative receipt, but generally, we've been net positive with open enrollment, right, by a wide margin, like $500,000.
And
And
we still
so-
are. This is just the part that goes.
We still are, because the payment we got was $896, and the part that went out was the $468, if I'm reading that right, oh my God.
Yeah.
Or $498.
$498.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're roughly 400,000 positive in dollars for open enrollment.
So that general aid deposit that's negative 1.4 million, that's, doesn't include open enrollment. That's the state aid coming in minus expenses of some type, right?
The 1.475 is the net of our general aid after everything was accounted for. It's the net cash that we received.
Still don't understand.
It's like your paycheck after they take out all your taxes.
Yeah.
They give
I get my bank statement. That's not a negative, no. So, because I'd be.
This is school finance.
I think that's
the
the
entry was because it went in on the asset side. When it is cash.
All right,
Thank you for trying.
Sorry.
full faith and confidence at all.
It sounds.
Good question.
Yes, secretary's class next year.
Any other questions or comments, assuming we're all happy with that? Negative number. So maybe it makes more sense on the next page, when you look at the summary of Fund 10. The balance sheet shows that deficit, then it shows the revenue and expenses, so the balance in Fund 10 is $288,000. Right?
Yeah, yeah, that adds up. So this shows that
Yeah.
number.
So that entry in the general cash receipts was just sort of a, it was the net state revenue after a bunch of inputs and outputs. About every meeting I look at you and wish I understood this stuff. Anything else? Vote please.
There was something for aptitude.
That's our Skillshare app.
Okay, just to note, I had heard of that. I forgot what it was, but what it rung a bell with me was CISA's, something that's at CISA. It might be possible. I don't know if that's one of the things Jamie gets on, you know, when you can subscribe and pay a fee, if you do, he negotiates really good deals for those kind of things. So if that's a possible one, probably still be on it. We're paying it. I mean, it may not be one of them, I'm not sure, but I'm gonna look up.
He sort of negotiates.
He does on a lot of things like that. That's why I brought that up last month when we talked the textbook things that somehow it. I think that would be a stretch. I think it would be hard to kind of do it free, but he does have. The learning platform, the online platform he did for a couple, so that he's cool.
So you can check with them on that. Any other questions, comments? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Isaac, second by Peggy to approve this month's expense vouchers and receipts. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next up, now we're back rolling again. Next up, we have item 7, our consent agenda, which includes minutes from our June 12th regular meeting, revisions to Neola policy 2266 related to non-discrimination on the basis of sex in education programs or activities. Third, approval by the Kickapoo School Board of Education of the annual declaration and parent notice of the district student academic standards that will be in effect for the upcoming school year pursuant to blah, blah, blah. A number of JV and varsity football fundraisers that were identified in the notes, and a resignation of a first grade teacher.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion by Janet, second by Rich to approve tonight's consent agenda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Moving on then to our brief action agenda tonight. And Rich, maybe I'll hand this to you if you wanted to summarize our discussion, but update on Neola policy 2264, Title IX, non-discrimination on the basis of sex and education programs.
Yeah, this is gonna be a new policy. So I'm gonna make a motion that for this one item, we suspend our policy that requires 2 readings for a new policy. I'd like to still be able to follow our policy that says policies have 2 readings, a first reading and a second reading. But my understanding is this has to be done by the end of the month.
So I'll second that.
And so that was my motion, was to just suspend our policy for this one time.
So motion by Janet, second by Rich to suspend for this one item, our policy requiring that policy changes go to the board twice before. Any discussion on that or clarification? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes.
And then, like Scott said, I think Marla sent this out to everybody. It was very long, so I don't know if everybody read it, but due to law, we have to update the policy, so there will actually be 2 policies. So our previous one was updated just with a couple names, and that'll be in effect until 31 July. And then based on law, this new one has to take effect 1 August going forward. So actually we'll have 2 policies just in case any type of complaint comes up from 6 months ago that would fall under the previous policy, and then anything 1 August forward would fall under this new policy that had to be updated again per current law. So if you had any, I mean, we talked through a couple of questions, is that it? I mean, it's just different harassment and other stuff. I know we had a conversation a little bit prior that, you know, there's added gender and gender identity and other stuff, but again, right now it's the law. So I don't know if there's any questions or. All right, well,
Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve updated policy.
I'll make that motion.
I can second.
Motion by Rich, second by Janet to approve the updated policy on Title IX. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Next up, the 2024-25 preliminary budget. I don't know who wants to run us through that, but I'm sure at people and
This budget that you're looking at, this preliminary, is basically the same as what you looked at back in June. There's been a minor change to it and very minor changes to it, mainly in the local sources 210 revenue on the first page there. For taxes. And also the expenditure in Fund 10 on the second page, about halfway down in the 430,000s. For, I'm in the wrong place right there. The 410,000 for interfund transfers. And those were both increased. And then in Fund 27, which is our special education fund, the increase in revenue directly correlates with the changes in Fund 10. Show a transfer into Fund 27 to cover excess expenditures and then extra expenditures in the category for instructional support services. Other than that, this is basically what you looked at, June, and I don't know how much more detail you might want me to go into. Again, going to something that Isaac said earlier, it would be nice if the funding formula in the state of Wisconsin was changed so that we didn't have so many unknowns until so late in the game. But for now, this is a balanced budget, meaning that our fund balance would remain the same. And our expenditures would match our revenues. Our July 1 estimate came in. There could be some volatility with that this year. There's some things going on in other areas of the state that could impact that. So there might be more of a difference between, usually the July 1 estimate comes in fairly close to what we'll see in October, when they give us our final numbers, but could vary a little bit more this year. Or we'll watch and see what happens, and if I get more information, if we get more information from DPI between now and then, I'll update as we get it. And of course, we're waiting for our student counts and our property valuations. So, as we wait for those three key things, can't do much more with it. But wait.
So your valuations for property, on room you will not get. Very early,
Oh, for either.
and open book. Open book and.
They're
in
doing
September,
actual.
revaluation town room is, and the way the assessor talked last night to me, town rooms 70%. Jump
What? Slow.
over the whole, because of all the properties gotten sold to the township at such a high rate. Get in compliance with the states. Yeah, it's gonna be,
I've got a clue what's happening with Forest, but open book and stuff is gonna be later than.
and I mean, usually by now they've had it, maybe,
Yeah.
And now they're-
At Forest
I think
meeting
it's
the
gonna-
other night, they had to have the open,
Yeah.
that meeting and then close it, postpone it until, but it had to legally be held and then they postponed it.
I did wonder because the May 1 estimate on property valuations came from the state were not greatly different from what we had for our October 1 census last year. So I wondered if there were some townships still that had to go through revaluations, but I think they have to have this to the state by October 1st. Because I think that's when the state has to give them to us.
I don't think.
cause
Or
if
it's
you
gonna
have
be done
open
by
book
then.
in the middle, so when they do it, the second or third week in September, the open book, then you come to board
That's
review in October. Then that's when you can look at the book, but you come in October and question it and maybe get it changed.
And then I think that it's gonna be on.
Yeah, that's where ours is, so I mean, it's.
Because he just called them to schedule that within the last meeting.
I just did it last night, scheduled it, so.
Oh, yep.
So, yeah, it's, I think either 15th or 16th, someplace in there is when their town room is having board review, which, you know, that's, to get all the numbers that he couldn't get because he had so many
So, yeah, we're gonna have.
changes
Still have to have a meeting. I mean,
as late as possible.
Well, the last Wednesday in October, which is when we usually have it, and I know that's later on the agenda, is the 30th.
really, have it late.
Yeah.
Anyway, so. Could be interesting.
Yeah, your numbers might change, at
I told them.
least for the town room valuation.
So
Well, and-
Melissa, just so I, can keep learning, I saw your face when Earl said that, Can you just interpret what a 70% increase in valuation means for you in terms of timeline and revenues? I mean, I have a general idea, but what's your thought process when you hear that? It's like, learn.
And Bloom says, well, and Bloom just had, we did.
Our tax levy is, it's all a pie. And then the different municipalities have their different pieces of the pie, the pieces aren't the same size. So when one township grows larger over the course of a year, they're paying more of our tax levy. And that can shrink. And we must do, because like your township grew quite a bit last year, the year prior. So your piece of the pie got bigger. This might help your piece of the pie shrink back down a little more. So you might see a decrease in your taxes because another municipality's taxes go up. Because
That's a good explanation.
I love that.
That's
'Cause
But when you have a valuation, the property goes up, the mill rate for your township goes down.
Right.
So,
Because you're paying on more dollars.
yeah, I mean, that's,
But it's hard
That's the
to
way it-
interpret.
that's where they feel
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
There's not for cranks it all over.
And what effect does that have on our budget?
Because
Is
our
that-
budget is based on valuation of the old school district.
Partially, yes, that does go into that's
Formula.
part of the formula and the revenue on the worksheet that determines our revenue.
If we only do a certain amount of taxes though,
It will,
because we have a higher value, it may lower our
it
mill rate.
lowers our mill
Mill
rate.
rate,
It
yeah.
lowers the mill rate, which then, is less taxes per thousand for our property owners.
That doesn't mean you pay less money because your value.
Your value, if your value goes up, it's not as, it's not, but your mill rate per thousand will go down.
But your taxes are going up, so-
No,
No,
no.
because that happened in West, the city of Westview beat.
Valuated.
It's hard to go to open book when you just bought the house. And say it's not working, I'm just throwing that out there, but, mine didn't go up, it was about what it was. My only point is that it stayed.
It ain't gonna change it, but it's just, in order to get plans for the darn state, then you gotta be 95.
Which they tell you what you have to have for a number. So why do you have to bother paying an assessor? Well, actually do it. They've already told you. What they're gonna do.
If you don't have the assessor do it, the state can come in and do it. And then you cannot go to this, when they come in and do it, or review, they will not change where, at least if you talk to an assessor, he might, okay, I'll look at this property and this property and maybe give you a little benefit.
or they may take the building with personal property out of the property off because.
Yeah, I mean, that's an advantage of going through an assessor instead of having the state come in and dictate that.
Yeah,
But they do dictate because they tell you when the number has to be.
Right,
That's right.
granted, that's thankful you.
Yeah.
One of the biggest reasons I made Batesville is like that property valuation number is supposed to be to us by October 1st, and it's a big part of determining our revenue limit and setting our tax levy and preparing for the annual meeting and finalizing our budget. So not having it in time is problematic.
Well, we're gonna be scheduling that meeting later, so. Okay, good. Midnight on Halloween.
Does anybody have any questions on this preliminary?
So maybe just in an email yesterday or today, Kim kind of explained increasing needs.
Yeah.
For student services, and that's a part of that increase as well.
Yeah, and part of that is that Fund 27, you mentioned,
Yeah.
right? That's special ed, so. Which might be
Does-
another thing to address with legislators, that hey, special ed funding is. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think about just like get 90% reimbursement.
yeah, but it doesn't keep up on. So,
Vouchers get 90% reimbursement, we get 83.
They don't have to take kids.
And,
They don't.
so looking at, thinking about the messaging we put out there toward the tail end of the process pretty heavily, when we were seeking referendum, was the message that this $400,000 is our upper limit. We may not necessarily levy that, it may be less than that. Given those increasing costs, as you pointed out, this first year anyway, looks like we'll be levying the full amount. So going into our annual meeting and any newspaper articles or discussions you folks have, it'd be good to fully explain why. And that that's not necessarily gonna be the case in years 2, 3, or 4. Cause some people might, hey, you said you're not gonna levy for the full amount. Here you are. It's certainly justified, but I think we just wanna be ready for that.
If we were to come out of declining enrollment, that would be helpful because then we would not have that exception in our revenue limit. Would be helpful.
Along those lines, pre-K class size was up considerably in the last year. That's remains up.
So far.
In any general statement about open enrollment applications over the summer? I don't know if it's gonna summarize.
I only have one so far.
What's that?
I have one so far.
Additional to what we
Yeah.
had before.
Yeah. Right. One in? Or one out?
One in.
All right, well, thank you, Melissa. Any other?
Yeah.
Make motion to approve the preliminary budget.
Second.
Motion by Isaac, second by Rich to approve the 2024-25 preliminary budget. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Preliminary budget is approved. Last item on the action agenda, that annual meeting date, perfect timing. Oh,
So Wednesday, the last Wednesday of the month is the 30th. And then Thursday, the 31st is how I'm going to present. You want to do the Wednesday?
so that's
Smart based on this discussion.
that doesn't put you in a pinch. Submitting anything to. state?
October 30th is probably our best bet.
Okay.
Yes, I can make a motion to set the date of the annual meeting for October 30th. 7 p.m. then, so.
I'll second. So motion by Janet, second by Isaac, to approve October 30th, 7 p.m. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We'll see you then. A few informational items on tonight's informational agenda. First item, discussion item, activity fund report. Well, it's the information. Negatives are good.
Yep. I just wanted to ask, and this is probably more for one here, and I don't exactly, because most of us in high school. Some of these numbers are like really big, so I assume they're raising money for certain projects or something, we don't just accumulate these.
Yeah, and the tech ed one, the big aspect of that is like when things go, Cranes like replaces
Yeah.
the cartridges and stuff with laser meters out of that phone. So that
So
takes a big chunk of some of that,
Isn't like the elementary activity account is up
When
to
it
almost
was-
$12,000. I'm assuming there's. I mean, my
Well, we
point
got
is,
that-
we don't need to raise money into this.
No, and that was mostly we got a donation last, I don't know if that was in there last week.
The picnic houses, that was kind of earmarked for playground. I think is, do we put some of the donation for lunch? Or no? No?
Thanks for the information.
I desperately want to ask again why negative numbers are good. I'm not giving it a.
It's kind of like the negative number.
And summer softball is gonna
actually two accounts that are backwards right now. One of them is the summer softball, and that one I'm not concerned about just because they've been spending money on concession food items, but they only do one deposit at the end of summer. By the end of summer, I'm expecting that to be back where it needs to be. And then the other one is on the top of the second page, and it's the middle school, high school recycling club. PC Goodrich kind of heads that one up, and I'm expecting within the first month of school that they'll have that back.
All right. Any other discussion on that? Thanks for pulling those numbers together. Next item then is the board retreat day. I know, we had a retreat last summer.
Yeah, so it's optional if you wanna do it every year, it's just, I'm here to talk about if you want to establish one, or you want to wait for next year, that's fine.
Yeah, kind of been doing it.
Yeah.
I think to that, I mean, I'm okay with that as part of,
Yep, I'm good with that.
do you feel that there's a need for anything?
The only item that we've sort of gotten away from with the referendum and other things was the strategic planning or mission statement, core values type discussion, but sitting here right this moment, I don't have the energy to even think about something like that, so I'm
It's
not-
been by the time referendum.
Yeah.
Maybe next year.
I'm okay with it.
Next summer.
So,
That's good.
and then July and August meetings. This is July.
What about committee?
Yeah, I don't, do we need to schedule any committee meetings? Are good on,
Should be good on policy.
Yeah, they haven't sent out the latest one yet, so we're okay so far.
Nothing's pressing at this point. Yeah, I get a summer break.
okay with that. So, none,
Not right now.
unusual. And then last item, bus purchase.
Yeah, so kind of similar to our model last year where Jeff was given the go ahead to, purchase the next bus, which allows for, a decrease in the pricing because he's able to put his name on, so last year it was a 24 bus. And this year he's looking at putting his name on a 2025 bus. There are only 5 buses, which would save $4,200. And like we've been in that cycle of continuing to purchase buses, which gives us that transportation aid, which has been positive. It was a great aid this year. So just, I think typically we've waited till later, but kind of a similar model that we used last year where it proved to work very well for us. So kind of looking at doing that same model to save additional money.
Just a question. And I know Jeff's not here, he's probably got an answer to this, but we cut a bus rate. So I'm not saying this is a year to do it, but we should be able to take a year that we don't buy a bus. Because we should be almost once.
Can we get rid of an extra bus?
We did get rid of a
Yeah.
2008 bus.
We always get rid of a bus.
So it's
Yeah,
last
this
year.
This year,
Yeah, this last
we got rid of it too.
year. Yeah, oh, got rid of it.
For that reason.
Yeah. So
So
in
the last one we got. rid of because it needed to be rid of. It wasn't gonna pass inspection.
right. So with the purchase of the new bus, he would sell the bus 10. And that's at a high-end resale bus, he said, looking at close to 15,000. Whether it went to surplus in Mount Morrow. He's dealing with the Wisconsin Bluebird bus business, a 7-day 2-passenger type C. He'd like to commit before school. What type of buses we've had?
I say we would change, because we haven't had Bluebirds.
Okay. One thing I do want to mention is that high cost transportation they can get, if we do a year without a bus, we're gonna replace you.
We'll lack.
We'll lack, we'll lose.
So informational at this point, I guess, but that's what he's looking at. We want to continue.
Yes, for that price though.
126.5.
126.
Was that included in the budget?
I believe what I have budget is either 120 or 125.
Or at least something?
Yeah, I think I may have 120.
That's good.
I know it's in there. I know it's not less than 120. Then no.
3 years ago, they were 90.
Let's not talk about these.
About 20 years ago, they were about 50.
There's only a handful of years ago they were in the 70s.
So we sold 2 buses this past year and may buy a new one. If we do, we'll sell one. So our fleet is 1 fewer bus. Right?
Yeah, apparently.
Which accommodates.
This year.
Yeah, but if we get one, we wouldn't be deferring another one. We would just be adding this one.
No,
No, you have to be rid of bus 10.
selling.
Also, one more, oh, okay. I just meant,
So we'd be selling the 2017,
okay.
Yeah, but
getting a 20.
and low, but you see what's going on now, it's the low end is better.
Yeah, it's more, yes, yeah.
Get more out of
Yeah,
But that's a good thing, it just makes our, it's working. Yeah. Plus it's worth something for a transportation director, not have to worry that he's gonna have a bus that doesn't pass. I mean,
Yeah.
we've lent buses to the park. Crawford, when they literally couldn't get a bus.
So the replacement schedule is probably not going to change. We have 1 fewer buses, but we're still gonna sell the oldest essentially.
That's what Justin, you know, that's
Yeah.
Jeff's deal. That's, yeah, he's got that plan in motion on these tracks. We just take it off the fixed asset. And
Yeah, but the other thing is you gotta realize high cost transportation, it's still a gamble because high cost transportation aid. You don't know.
you know,
Depends how much money they put in the pot, how many districts, drive more miles.
Start figuring out how we do it.
And start figuring it out. Isn't that important?
All right, anything else on that? If not, we'll move on to reports, starting with superintendent.
Well, this week I attended and actually chaired my first TED joint review board meeting. They didn't have a quorum, so they called an ask. I could, I was actually attending a different meeting. And so I walked in and then asked me to chair. Okay.
I call this.
Marla and I attended, met with Ty to get trained on more of the app to G capabilities that will allow us to use text messaging, emails, robocalls, which could be text to speech or audio voice. After we had that experience with the threat and tried to communicate to our community, and it wasn't super successful. Not everybody got the communication, and we want to be sure that we can communicate in those instances. So we are trained and will be set up and be sending out communications on effectively using a system that will communicate as needed. This will also serve as a communication tool for our staff, for our safety tree. We're involved in, obviously, this new Title IX came out kind of with rapid response, needing this August 1st approval of the policy and then additional trainings. So attending different webinars, sessions on training behind the Title IX and understanding that to the fullest extent. Met with the area superintendents to complete our fall in service with West Beaver, Rosewood, DeSoto, Lafarge, and Kickapoos. Big in service, having Jason Techie, who's ranked as one of the best speakers. He's a TED Talk speaker. I'm really anxious to put our staff in front of him. That day will also provide the Title IX training for all staff, as it's a webinar put out by our Shana Lewis lawyers firm. So all staff will be there to get the training. We will have lunch with all of these districts, have time to spend together with grade level or departments. Amongst all of those individuals in our district and all those districts that I've named. And then our afternoon will be a session on Orange Frog, which is a parable about positivity with Shelley Severs. And DJ and I met with Tracy as she did an assessment of our roof, our preventative maintenance, and that went really well. There were some repairs that were very normal, but she said our roof looked very good. I think the repairs were like 1,800, which was great. Looking at probably, she's stated 3 to 5 years to replace that patch of roof. And we asked if we could try to extend that, you know, closer to 5, maybe even to 6. And so we'll be keeping that under close surveillance just to see how that roof is wearing. But she was very pleased with what she had noticed up there thus far. I think that's all I've written down for today. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Kim.
Thanks. Summer school kicked off Monday. We're getting more kids because we had some show up today, which is the 3rd day. We had some kids show up yesterday, so they're all like, "Yeah, summer school." I only sent home a number of emails, but they're coming in, so that's a good thing. They're 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are doing a passport around the world thing. It's kind of neat. They were making I'm not sure how this went. One of the countries they picked was Jamaica, and for some reason I was hoping for jerk chicken, and because they've been making stuff. Yesterday was quesadillas, but they actually went with the Jamaican bobsled team and cooked pool noodles. I know you don't think of the Jamaican bobsled team, but they used the movie, and they made all kinds of marble roller coasters, which actually turned out really cool. Everybody's getting swimming for the little kids. We had a little hiccup in the pool today. We're still figuring out how to run that many kids through the pool and have it work. So the preschoolers got to go, and then chlorine levels came up. So TJ is working on that, but we're good to go tomorrow again. Teachers are completing their reading class that we all have to do for Act 20, and then on the 24th, everybody will be one of the in-service days here. And then the state has come out with the screener that they picked for the Act 20, which wasn't Fastbridge, so we'll have to figure out how we're going to do that. Well, we'll use what they give us, and how we use Fastbridge still. And they haven't come out with their plan that we have to go send to the parents, all that. But the DEPI said it would be out by June 15th. It is now July 10th, and none of that stuff has come out. But at least we have the screener, so that's a step in the right direction. But otherwise, it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty quiet. So, any questions?
All right. I've been off quite a bit, so just kind of getting back into swinging things, but checking in on summer school. There's a lot of kids in robotics. They're really having a good time with that, so that's really good to see. And got a full class of driver's ed kids as well, so that's good. Within that, test scores are starting to pop in for ACT scores, AP scores came in actually yesterday, so starting to go through and assess some of that and look at some things and filter through that. Last month talked about Mrs. Eggy was the season 3 school counselor of the year. And we found out not long after that, that Casey Goodrich was the CSA Special Education Teacher of the Year. So congrats to her. Awesome, well deserved. And the last thing, this weekend, we have 5 trap kids that are going to nationals. So pretty awesome. It's in Michigan, I think so. But yeah, so some really good shooters. We know one of them has shot multiple 100 rounds in the last few weeks. So, cool kids will do really well. So, that's what I have. Any questions? Alright.
Thanks, Andy and Aaron. That moves us to convening the closed session. Pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute 19.85, paragraph 1, part C, considering employment, promotion, compensation, or performance evaluation data of any public employee over which governmental body has jurisdiction or exercises responsibility. The purpose tonight, middle school, high school secretary position and the superintendent evaluation. Do I have a motion? Motion by Rich, second by Earl to move to closed session. This would be a roll call vote.
Janet Mathis.
Yes.
Earl Wallace.
Yes.
Isaac Wallace. Rich James.
Yes.
Peggy McCormick.
Yes.
Scott Walter.
Yes.
Yeah.
Good, Marla?
Yep, we're good.
Back in open session.
I'll make a motion to approve middle school, high school secretary position, Sophie Sherry.
Motion by Earl, second by Isaac to approve Sophie Sherry as the middle school, high school secretary. All in favor? Aye.
I will
Opposed?
abstain from voting on this one.
Sure. So it sounded like all ayes with one abstention. Motion passes, leaving us with one last motion tonight.
I'll second it.
Motion by Isaac, we'll give it to Peggy with the second to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Thanks, everybody.
I'm hoping you,
Good looking. Oh, that's me.
What was the meeting you had this year?